All righty.
Now, do you see my screen?
Not yet. So you'll have to share screen here.
I hit share screen. Okay, let's. There it is.
All righty.
Now you should see it, hopefully.
Perfect. I'll go ahead and get started then. Welcome back, everybody, to the Commercialization and Beyond True Quality Summit Series. If you haven't already, be sure to register for tomorrow morning's product launch event starting before tomorrow's first session. We're extremely excited to unveil our brand new risk solutions. I'll put a link in a little bit in the chat to register. Up next, we have preparing a device master record. And who better to lead this presentation than Dr. Stephen Coulter. He is the general manager at RCA. The session is going to run for 35 minutes, and we'll have 10 minutes allotted for questions at the end. Please ask those in the Q&A. I'll try to keep up with the chat and the Q&A, but Q&A is best place for questions. And if you don't mind, in the chat, just kind of say where you're logging in from. We'd love to see where everybody is listening in. And if you have any questions, again, Q&A is best place for that. A little intro for Steve. He has many areas of expertise in product development, design controls, technology partnerships, product lifecycle management, and acquisition analysis. He's experienced in the development of manufacturing process controls and quality limits for critical product lines. And has global background in biomedical, medical device, combination product, OTC drug, consumer product, and environmental product companies ranging from startups to multi-billion-dollar companies. We're very excited to have you, Steve. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, as Laura said, I'm Steve Coulter. I'm one of the subject matter experts at Regulatory Compliance Associates. Today we're going to talk about the transitioning of a medical device, a product you've been designing, into the manufacturing space. And we use the design transfer process, and the key tool in that is the device master record, the DMR. First off, let's talk about who is RCA. So RCA is a worldwide support organization for the life sciences, whether it's devices, pharmaceuticals, biologics. We've been inundated with combination products over the last few years, which has been great. We're helping people get used to that. And compounding pharmacies. Most of our work is in the resolution of compliance and regulatory challenges, but we actually touch on all facets of product commercialization, from the early stages, regulatory affairs, quality, post-market support, and we work globally. So when you're looking at submissions, we're going to be looking at US, European, international, everywhere. Couple just historicals. RCA was founded in 2000, and we were acquired by Sotera Health in 2021. So who is Sotera? You would be your next question. Sotera is a company. We're 4 companies with one focus: safeguarding global health. We are a fully integrated global provider of mission critical health sciences. We work anywhere from the lab services at Nelson, the sterilization solutions with Nordion and Sterigenics, and consulting in product development, commercialization, regulatory, quality assurance, everything else in RCA. We are a vertically integrated organization as we look at it now, with the addition of the regulatory side of this. So now we cover the design aspects of a new product, the testing, sterilization, and the regulatory submissions. And we do work both pre-submission and post-submission. So enough about us. We are a global company and we have global clients. So let's get into the agenda for today. What we're going to be looking at is, why do we do device master records and design transfer? Get some definitions out of the way. I do want to touch on cross-functional interaction. Very important that we talk about that. We want to talk about what is in a DMR, how the DMR is used, the use of checklists, and then we'll open this up for questions for everybody. So as I said, why do we do the DMRs? The whole purpose of doing design transfer and utilizing DMRs is all about risk mitigation. We're looking at business risk mitigation. We're looking at technical manufacturing risk mitigation, and we're looking at regulatory and quality risk mitigation. On top of that, we're looking at user satisfaction. So if you break those down, a manufacturer, and I don't care if it's internal, whether you're going from the R&D department, engineering department, and you're now engaging the manufacturing arm of your company, or whether you're going to external, CMOs, CDMOs, they should never, ever want to accept a product into production until they are assured that the business risks have been minimized or eliminated. You can never eliminate them, so you're trying to minimize them. But you have to remember that the driving force for manufacturing is going to be cost of goods. So they want to make sure that they have the right product, all the systems are in place, so it's a smooth integration, and they're not having to go through multiple iterations on the manufacturing floor. The place for that is in product development and engineering. So this is a business risk mitigation. You're taking the cost out of R&D and put it into production. So they should make sure it's locked down solid at this point. Now, we talk about mitigation of quality issues and compliance issues. The whole goal of doing a proper design transfer is to make sure and these are key phrases the FDA uses all the time and auditors will use all the time. You want the process to be reproducible and reliable. Reproducible, you're making the exact same product over and over again. With repetition, you get precision, and then you want it to be reliable. So it does no good if you're nice and reproducible, but you've missed the target. So that's what the design transfer process is all about, making sure you have the right target, the right product, and that you have the precision to do it the same every time. And if you think about, we are here, any of our clients that's looking to put a product on the market, ultimately they're trying to satisfy user, get to the point of user satisfaction. If the user isn't happy with your product, they're not going to stay with you. They're not going to stay with your product. They're not going to stay with. So ultimately, this gets back to user satisfaction as well. Okay, now for some of the boring part. I know nobody likes to sit here and go through these. This is a matter of having this on file so you know where to go look. All of this is stated in the CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulations. And if you ever have to look it up, just knowing a couple spots, a couple anchor points to go pull them up is all you really need to know. Because you want to be making sure you're looking at the most current anyway. So you're always going to want to go back and check this. just for a hierarchy, if you're trying to take a look at medical devices versus drugs or biologics, the medical devices are in the 800 series. The 820 series, so if you get not just from the 800s, but to the 820s, those are the quality system regulations. They are the regulations, the GMP regulations for medical devices. And then one step lower on that is going to be 820.30, which are your design controls for medical devices. And then one of the clauses in 820.30 is clause H on design transfer. And all it says is you have to do design transfer. It's real simple. And then the 820.181 are your manufacturing controls. And in there they say you shall establish and maintain master records. So, these are two of the things you have to. You start with design controls, and then you turn this into manufacturing controls. And this all falls under the 820 series, the quality systems regulations. We're not going to cover ISO per se. I am going to point out that basically ISO and CFRs are the same. ISO 1345. They align with each other. They have cross tracing that people have done multiple. We have created matrices of these for help in the field. The section we'd be looking at there is 7.3.8, which is all about the design and transfer process. The fact that the government uses medical device single audit process, MDSAP, tells you right from they accept either one to satisfy the other. So if you've completed your CFR 820 series, then you're okay on 1345. And likewise, if you're certified to 1345, you've already pre-qualified for your audit for the 820 series. So that's all I'm really going to touch on ISO. We're going to focus on the CFRs, but if you have questions, by all means, let us know at the end of this. So now, one of the things that's critically important, in my opinion, is going to be early cross-functional interaction. This is the diagram over here on the side is the famous waterfall model out of the FDA guidance documents. And it lays out several things. The white boxes in the middle here are your design process. So we're going to come back to this in a second here. But the goal is for the best outcomes, you don't want to wait until you're through with the box and then throw it over the wall to the next people trying to catch it. You want to engage them so everybody's working together and you already know where you need to be without waiting for the iterations. The sequencing, why they call it the waterfall model is important. The sequencing is critical. You can't start a project without establishing design inputs and user needs. User needs, what is the actual user, whether it's a patient or whatever, is, that's only one of the things that goes in the design inputs. Manufacturing requirements, regulatory requirements also go in there. So all the way back here, doing all of the data mining to figure out what we need in our inputs. That's why I say this is critical that we get manufacturing engaged back here. 20 years ago, we started calling this design for manufacturability, or longer maybe. And that was the whole point. Don't design a product and then go ask manufacturing if they can build it. Let's engage all the groups back here and make sure you engage the quality people who say you need these aspects and the regulatory people who say You have to follow these guidances. Then you get into the design. You can't do the design process unless you've established and approved the design inputs. Once I get the design out, the design process completed, then what I'm doing is we're going to characterize the product, the final design. This full characterization is what we're going to be talking about in the DMR and the design transfer process. These outputs are the characterization of the final product. And then you take that and we just call it medical device. This is the transfer. This is when you go to commercialization, go to manufacturing. The whole focus of this is all about quality on each step. If you build the quality in throughout, then it's going to be higher assurance that you have all of your compliance issues solved by the end. I'm recommending the manufacturing engineers get involved all the way through this. Here's just an example of the cross-functional participation plan. When you go to build your design and development plan, one of the things it asks of you is to say, talk to me about the interfaces between your cross-functional groups. How and when do they talk to each other? So we know whether or not, we know whether or not they're engaged. Each one of these plan grids is going to be unique. Each product is different. Each company is different. Different people wear different hats. This is simply one example. So user needs, I need to make sure I gather the input from everybody. Quality assurance on this one didn't want to be part of that because they're going to sign off on the user needs as it gets formalized in the inputs. I don't need my healthcare provider. They help set the clinical need, but they're not engineers. They're not going to get engaged. This is for this group. And remember, this is going to be different for each company, each product. So this is a tool. The regulations do require that you speak to this in your planning, but how you do it, it's entirely up to you at the level of detail. This is all risk-based. Okay, now let's get into the design outputs. As I mentioned a bit ago, design outputs really are the foundation for the DMR. They fully characterize the design outputs or the final design. So the outputs, it's critical. Remember, your user needs are pretty loose. They're very subjective. I want the product to do this. And then you turn that into engineering the specific requirements, and those are your design inputs. Design inputs have to be unambiguous. They have to be testable. But you want to leave enough room. You have those in place before you go through your design phase. So you want to leave your options open in terms of how you're going to solve the design problem. The design output is after you have frozen your design. So this is your final design. You've picked your final one. If you want multiple options, then you're going to do a design output for each one of those. That's a waste of time and money for the organizations. So at this point, you should be freezing your options, take your frozen design, and that's the one we're going to characterize. Each one of the phases, inputs, design, outputs, feeds the next one. So our design phase gives us the final product where we pull the design outputs from them. So our finished design, we get our characterization, and it is a full characterization. Those are the outputs from my design process. The input from my manufacturing process, are the manufacturing specs. The design outputs are the foundation for the manufacturing specifications. They're not the same because manufacturing specs have more than just the characterization. There's more involved in that, but that's the handoff. My manufacturing specifications tell me how I'm going to get started and develop my manufacturing process, my manufacturing controls. Coming out of that, I'm pushing to the next box, which is going to be the commercial phase, where I'm looking at my key process indicators, my SPC controls, so that I know things are under control and I know how to trend, when to target something for improvement, etc. So each phase, and again, it goes back to that waterfall concept, each one drives the next. They don't go back and forth. They don't flow uphill. It's all about going forward. The manufacturing specifications have to be sufficiently detailed that I'm making the exact same product each time. Not similar, the same. And in addition to that, if I'm to change even locations within my plant, but say I changed to a different plant, I was manufacturing in Pennsylvania and I'm going to manufacture in Florida. Well, it's a new plant. I have to start over with my design transfer to make sure the same production is happening there. Let's get into just some examples. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list here, but your design outputs are going to be in several buckets. They're going to be your design specifications. What do they look like? They're drawings. They're specification sheets from your vendors when you pull in components. The materials sheets. They're dimensions. They're not just a measurement. They're measurement with tolerances and dimensions and which ones are critical and not critical. It's the software code. You have to, the software specifications. Packaging and labeling is part of your design for medical devices. So it's all part of that, but we pull it out separately. You don't just need your content on your packaging and labeling. You need the material specifications. You need the processing methods. How are you going to put them together? What adhesive is on the labels? What's the paper that the labels are on? And then the validation of the equipment to make sure that the equipment is capable. If you say, I'm going to put a label on a pre-filled syringe, is your equipment capable of putting on the same place each time? Things like that. So these are things you work out during the design process. Your process specifications now, switching from the design and getting more into the production, equipment specs, equipment validations, environmental controls, even the process flow through the plant for optimization, maintenance and calibration, anything to do with your plant. And again, making sure we do reproducible and reliable manufacturing. And then quality assurance they're involved at all phases. Quality assurance signs off on every stage. They are our checker to make sure we're following the rules. So they're making sure that you have acceptance criteria at all phases, that your test equipment and methods are all validated, that you're using standards and keep a calibration logbook and everything else. This again, take a look at your opportunity for your cross-functional. The first two are primarily your design engineer. Third one's mainly your production engineer. Fourth one is mainly your quality engineer. But like I just said, everybody's engaged throughout this. All of those three that I just mentioned are going to be engaged in each one of these steps. So it's important that we talk to each other and make sure things go smoothly as we're going through these. Let's talk about some checklists, and I'm going to give you some examples here. Checklists are a great tool. I love tools like this because they do a couple of things. First off, they're very easy to use. If I start with a blank piece of paper and I have to wonder what I have to do, then I'm going back to regulations, I'm going back to SOPs, and I don't know that I remembered everything the same each time. Excuse me. So the beauty of having checklists, they're easy to use, they're visual, so everybody can pick them up and comprehend them. And it helps you avoid omissions. That's the key. You don't want to get all the way through this and somebody goes, you know what? We forgot the UDI. So we got to go back and do that. Excuse me. So that's one of the things. Checklists help make sure we don't make mistakes. It's good standard practice is to include these checklists in your SOPs. That way, when somebody new comes into your manufacturing process, if you have change in management or something, or you go to a new plant, then you have the same process going on. Don't rely, I've always tried to help people understand. I love working with strong performers, strong partners, but you never, ever build your process around good employees, because sooner or later, good employees retire, shift jobs, something. So you have to build your process around a standardized practice to make sure you cover your bases. Good employees just make that work really smoothly. But in the meantime, build your practices with safety nets. And that's what these checklists are, safety nets. These typically are lists, not details. So I'm not going to regurgitate documentation from everywhere, but what I am going to do is have an index that tells you where to go follow these things. So you have manufacturing plans, you have quality plans, you have regulatory plans. These are the plans that go into the early phase planning in the design history file. Again, this is just like the grid for cross-functionality participation. These are simply examples. Each one of these is going to be unique for each company and each product line. Now, your company, once you understand how your company operates, you're not going to have to repeat that multiple times. You kind of start to understand that. You understand what your culture is, what your key concerns are, things like that. But still, each product is different, and the risk of each product is different. Just some examples of things you better be covering. And actually, if you want to see some of the details of this, they're back in that 21 CFR 820.181. It lists the key topic areas, not a detailed manufacturing plan, but the key topic areas that you need for each one of these. But some of the things you have to remember, because these are just in experience are sometimes missed. If you have test methods, people pretty much know I have to have validated test methods. But what about if you have fixtures or custom methods? Those have to be qualified and put under controlled drawings and everything else, just like anything else. So don't forget your fixtures and your test methods. All of your test release, I don't care if it's incoming materials, work in process, or final goods, finished goods release testing, they all need their acceptance criteria. You have to have your trending limits with statistical controls specified up front. You don't run the tests, wait for the results, and then say, well, let's see what makes sense here. No, you specify how you're going to treat this data. It's all part of the monitoring, measurement, trending. This is all about control and precision. And that's manufacturing optimizes its costs with control and precision. So that's why it's so critical. The DMR, that's the design, or that should be device master record. Again, like I said, it's an index. You use only controlled documents. Everything is in there. If you start going through your checklist and you go, ooh, this one's just an R&D justification. Nope. You got to go back and turn that into a controlled document for it to satisfy this. So those are some of the rules that you have to do. The whole goal here is to make sure you're making the identical product, not the same, the identical. So the key here is reproducibility. The way I look at this is you've spent all the effort fine-tuning a design for a medical device, and you feel that you have a fine medical device now. It's exactly what you want. You're happy with it. It's nice and shiny, and you're ready to go. This transition step now is so critical to making sure that we have an equally controlled and equally fine manufacturing process to go through commercialization and get the product to the market. So it's don't waste your time in the design and then leave, too many gaps, too many omissions in the manufacturing transfer. That is a critical mistake. The regulatory status. Why does this even matter? A lot of people go in there like, why would manufacturing care about that? This is all about the business. Got to remember, is the product even released yet? And when I say release, it could be an approval, it could be a clearance, it could be a classification. It depends on where you're going. What markets am I going to? What are the regulatory requirements? Am I allowed to commercialize and distribute this product yet? Now, depending on where you are, and I'll come back to this in a second, you can do production at risk. Nothing says that I have to have completed my regulatory clearances before I can start manufacturing goods. You just can't let them get out in the hands of a user. So if you're going to have production at risk, you better have good controls about where those things are quarantined and controlled and can't be released. So that's really critical. And if your business decision is, I can afford the cost of that inventory to save on time and getting product into the sales bag so my sales and marketing team can make their plans. If they want to take the risk of scrapping that inventory and increasing the cost there because they made a bad call, that's their call. What is the business decision? What are their needs? Is it time to market, or is it production costs and inventory costs that are at risk? If say the FDA comes back and says, I love everything, but you're going to have to change a label. Well, that's a cost that goes in your cost of goods. And so those are the types of things you try to figure out whether or not you can tolerate as you go through. So these are value decisions. And, that's why you have to figure out what the questions to ask. What are your rollout plans? Are you limited? Is your capacity in distribution limited if I'm going to multiple geographies around the world? Do I have all that locked up? So that's why I say this one is a business decision that is being made jointly, again, cross-functionally for everybody. Okay, that's what I had today. I know it may have left some questions, but there's a limit to what we can cover. I've tried to talk about the design process, providing design outputs, how the design outputs result in a design or device master record, and then the transitioning to the manufacturing transfer and getting a reliable manufacturing process in place. Thank you very much. I'll open up for questions.
All right, awesome. We have a couple of really good questions in here. The first one I want to start off with, so you mentioned waterfall method. Can regulatory compliance be achieved utilizing agile methodology versus waterfall method?
Absolutely. Got to remember things like waterfall and especially most of your ISO methods are talked about as suggestions, not regulations. So the waterfall is they tell you what you have to do. They don't insist that they go in the proper order, but it's a strong suggestion. Now, there's a difference between can you and should you, because if you follow their guidances and their guidance says to follow the waterfall and to follow the sequencing, and you choose to do it a different way, the burden is on you to demonstrate your process is as reliable as the one that they suggested. Not that you can't do it, just more of the burden is on you to demonstrate you did it well.
Awesome. We have a very popular question here. What does a DMR look like for a CMD medical product?
For a what?
For software as a medical device product.
Oh. It's still going to have all the steps, the user needs, the inputs, all of your design reviews during your design process stage. It's going to have a listing of the code. It's going to have all your risk files. So it's going to have all those. Your outputs are going to be the code, your gaps, and really it's going to be heavily focused, in my experience, on your mismanagement files, because from the years I've worked with it, and I'm not a software person, but I had them as part of our systems teams. Software is never finished. It always needs improvement. So, part of that's throwing it out in the field and getting improvements later based upon what new features you want. But it's going to look very much like a DHF, just your technical pieces of it are all about the code and the risks and the process, but you're still going to have use testing. You're still going to, in fact, you have more use testing in software than almost anywhere else.
Okay, another good question here. So I have one that was asking about if you were using a contract manufacturer to do your components and assemblies for your finished device, how do you manage your DMR in that situation?
That's really simple, through your quality agreement. One of the things you need to understand is who owns the product. If you are the specification setter, you are the manufacturer of record. And most companies, and we recommend this, retain that strategy. We will own the specifications, so we will own the DHF. But the DMR is all focused at the manufacturer. So 9 times out of 10 or more, they're going to own the DMR because it's going to be the translation of what you gave them from design outputs and manufacturing specs and how they turn that into processes, SOPs, trending, and all that. The iteration back to you now is things like the scrap rate, complaint rates, and things like that need to come back to the investigations and product improvements. But usually the DMR is at the manufacturer, and this has to be spelled out in your quality agreement.
Awesome. So another question is, do you have any advice for custom designs? So like 3D printing in the specific case that are dependent on material used?
Okay, I'm going to throw that back and say, why is it different? I know that's a flippant response, but it's simply a matter. Remember, make sure in the early stages I don't corner myself into a single design. Leave my options open. But once I have a design freeze and I have my product and process, and the product and process, think about it, that material is going to define what's the same and what's not the same in that. So once I get to that design freeze, everything else is still the same. You have to have strict controls of your materials specifications and tolerances on that. You have to have your incoming checks on those materials to make sure that they're precise, because that's one of the things with 3D printing. You get a little bit off on your mixtures and you lose your mechanical and stability properties of that. So that's critical. But you simply are going to have to spend a whole lot more time doing it's the incoming materials controls and process controls in the 3D printing that you can spend more time on.
I have another question. What's the difference between quality engineers and quality assurance?
Okay. I have a number of friends who are quality engineers. So their answer would be the quality assurance are all the managers that sit up top and tell the quality engineers all the work that has to be done. Quality assurance, sometimes it's simply called the quality department, is the organization. Their responsibility is to make sure that your processes, your documentation, everything else are following the regulations and your SOPs. Once your SOPs are in place, it's actually far more important that a company follow the guidance in their SOPs than go back and try to figure out how to follow everything in the QSRs. Because if you can't do what you said you're going to do in your own SOPs, you're in trouble. So quality assurance makes sure that everything's being done properly. Quality engineers usually get more involved in the problem solving. So something went out of whack. Scrap rate is up. We've got complaints in the field, whatever. And so they tend to be your engineering component of quality assurance. Hope that helps.
We have another question on roles, but when should regulatory affairs sign off on the DMR process?
Again, this is going to be dependent on the culture of your company. I usually want not the DMR, the design transfer, signed off by all the executive functional areas. So regulatory, medical, quality, design, manufacturing. I want them all signing off there. They should all sign off on the inputs, because that's where you lay the foundation for what is necessary. And if you forgot whole areas of inputs, chances are you're going to have to go back and repeat your design because all of a sudden you had a conflict. The other area I love to see everybody sign off on is at the end. Before this goes out for the design transfer, before I start paying for brick and mortar and new manufacturing lines, think about the capital outlay. That's a business decision. And I don't want somebody dragging their heels and waiting 6 months later and say, I told you so. No, I want them engaged right there. So it's really at the very beginning and very end at the design transfer. DMR is one piece of the design transfer. It's a critical piece. It's a huge piece, but there's more to it than the DMR.
Thanks. I think we have some time for a few more questions. We have another popular question of where can early stage medical device startups find templates for a manufacturing plan, quality plan, and regulatory plan?
Call us. There are a number of electronic systems out there. One of our partners, Greenlight Guru, has a number of them. We're not here to recommend anybody per se, but if you simply go on the internet, you can look up systems. it is beneficial to at least engage a consulting company like RCA, anybody like us, to get their opinion, because some of these are less robust than others and require you to do far more customization than is useful. So if you're a startup, you don't want to pay tens of thousands of dollars for an electronic system just to find out that it's worthless, and you got to hire the designers of that system for a couple of $100,000 to come on in and customize. And I saw a company have that happen, a startup company, and they were not happy. They hired us after that, and we went in and we called out what we could use from this standardized set of plans and SOPs and things. And after that, we said, look, at your size, we design systems for the right size, right level of risk for each company. And if you're a Pfizer or a Baxter, you're going to need a big, bold system, robust, because you're going to get scrutinized from all over the globe. If you're a small startup company in Kentucky, you don't need that level of a system. So let's make something that you can handle. The most important thing is to find something you can stick with, something you can follow without forgetting steps. If you forgot steps after you said in your SOPs that you were going to follow them, that's a big problem. So it's getting something that can work for you. A lot of these are plans that I've been putting together for so many years. It just happens now.
Awesome. Well, we're running close to time. I know we didn't get everybody's questions answered, and I apologize for that. But definitely reach out to RCA. I'm not sure if Steve would be open to answering some additional questions as well offline, but I'll leave that to him.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I see you have your email on the slide, and the slides are available. So definitely, since Steve is up to it, reach out to him for any additional questions. We thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Stephen, for presenting this great information. We also want to remind you guys to make sure you register for our Risk Solutions launch event tomorrow morning. Again, link was in the chat earlier. I think there's also a link in the public chat as well. We will be rounding out today hearing from Darwin Schurig on talent management strategies related to the commercialization process. That will start shortly. But again, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Steve. Hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Laura.
See you.